The day I realized I was only temporary, I used to believe that love was enough. Not perfect love, not movie love, just the kind of love that shows up every single day. The kind that wakes up early to make lunches before work. The kind that sits through school concerts and dentist appointments. The kind that remembers how someone takes their coffee and notices when they've had a bad day without them saying a word. For 8 years, I gave that kind of love to a family that never fully accepted me. And the strange thing is, I didn't realize it until the day they stopped pretending. My name is Daniel. I'm 44 years old, and for most of my adult life, I considered myself a patient man. I met my ex-wife, Rachel, at a neighborhood barbecue when I was 36. She was recently divorced, exhausted, and trying to hold herself together while raising a 10-year-old daughter named Ava. At the time, Ava barely spoke. She stood close to her mother the entire afternoon, arms crossed tightly over her chest, watching everyone like she expected disappointment before anyone even opened their mouth. Rachel later told me the divorce had destroyed her. Her biological father, Eric, left suddenly. One week he was promising family vacations and movie nights. The next week he moved across the country with another woman. He stopped calling regularly after 6 months. By the second year, he only sent occasional birthday texts. By year 3, even those stopped. Rachel carried the weight of everything after that. The bills, the emotional breakdowns, the loneliness, the parenting. I admired her strength. And slowly, carefully, I became part of their lives. At first, it was small things. I fixed Rachel's leaking sink. I helped Ava with a science project. I drove them to the airport when Rachel's mother got sick in another state. Nothing dramatic, just consistent. That's how trust is built. Quietly, one brick at a time. A year later, Rachel asked me to move in. I remember being nervous. Not because of Rachel, because of Ava. I knew how delicate the situation was. Kids don't choose divorce. They don't choose new people entering their lives. And they definitely don't choose stepfathers. So I promised myself something. I would never try to replace her father. I would simply be someone safe, someone reliable, someone who stayed. At first, it seemed to work. Ava started opening up. She asked me for help with homework. She'd sit next to me during movies. Sometimes she even called me when Rachel was unavailable. The first time she got sick, while Rachel was out of town for work, I stayed awake all night checking her temperature and bringing her water. At 3 a.m., she looked at me half asleep and whispered, "Thanks, Dan." That tiny moment meant more to me than she probably ever realized. A year after moving in, Rachel and I got married. It wasn't a huge wedding, just close friends and family. Ava stood beside her mother in a blue dress, holding flowers. During the reception, she gave a short speech. She said she was glad her mom was happy again. Then she looked directly at me and said, "Thanks for taking care of us." I nearly cried. For years after that, I genuinely believed we were becoming a real family. I coached Ava's soccer team when no other parent volunteered. I taught her how to drive. I spent weekends helping with school projects. I attended every single parent-teacher conference. Rachel worked long hours as a healthcare administrator, so a lot of household responsibility naturally fell onto me. I didn't mind. I handled grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning, repairs, scheduling appointments, school pickups. I became the invisible structure holding everything together. And honestly, I was proud of that because I loved them. Love makes sacrifice feel meaningful. Until one day it doesn't. The change started slowly when Ava turned 16. Teenagers pull away, that's normal. She became moodier, more distant, more protective of her privacy. I respected that. But there was something else underneath it, something sharper. She started correcting people whenever they referred to me as her dad. "He's not my dad." At first, she said it casually. Then more aggressively. Then constantly. Every correction felt like a tiny paper cut, not enough to destroy you, but enough to leave damage over time. Rachel always brushed it off. "She's just figuring herself out. She's emotional lately. Don't take it personally." But it was personal, How could it not be? I wasn't trying to erase her biological father. I never even spoke badly about him, despite everything he'd done. But after 8 years of raising someone, loving someone, protecting someone, hearing "you're not my real dad" stops feeling like clarification. It starts feeling like rejection. Still, I stayed patient, because that's what I always did. Then came the Tuesday night that changed everything. I remember every detail: the smell of garlic bread in the oven, the sound of the dishwasher running, rain hitting the kitchen windows. Rachel was upstairs finishing work emails. Ava came downstairs furious because I'd asked about her missing math assignment. That was it, a normal parenting question, but she exploded. She shouted that I needed to stop acting like her father. She said I had no authority over her. Then came the sentence that broke something permanently inside me. "You're just the guy my mom married. You'll never actually belong here." Silence filled the kitchen, heavy, cold. I looked at her, waiting for regret. There wasn't any, only anger, years of it. Maybe resentment I never fully saw. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I simply stared at someone I had loved like my own child and realized she had never truly seen me the same way. I went upstairs calmly. Rachel looked up from her laptop. "What happened?" I told her. I expected shock, maybe anger, at the very least concern. Instead, she sighed, actually sighed, like I'd interrupted her with a minor inconvenience. "She's just upset," Rachel said. "She doesn't mean it." I asked if she planned to address it. Rachel rubbed her forehead. "Dan, not tonight. She's stressed about school." That moment hurt more than Ava's words, because it showed me exactly where I stood. Ava had wounded me. Rachel had dismissed me. One attacked, the other minimized. Together, they revealed the truth. I was useful, needed even, but not protected, not prioritized, not truly family. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room alone, replaying years of memories, teaching Ava how to ride a bike, helping her through panic attacks before exams, staying at the emergency room when she broke her wrist, selling my motorcycle because Rachel needed help covering medical bills, missing vacations with friends because family responsibilities came first. I thought about every sacrifice, every compromise, every time I swallowed my feelings to keep peace inside the house. And for the first time, I asked myself a terrifying question. What if none of it mattered? Around sunrise, I made my decision. I packed quietly, not dramatically, not angrily, just carefully. Methodically, like someone finally accepting reality. I packed clothes, personal documents, books, and a few sentimental items. I left behind furniture I'd paid for, kitchen appliances I bought. The patio set I spent an entire weekend assembling. None of it felt worth fighting over. Rachel found me loading boxes into my car. At first, she thought I was joking, then confused, then irritated. "You're seriously leaving?" I nodded. "Over one argument?" That sentence told me she still didn't understand. It was never one argument. It was 8 years of slowly learning my place. 8 years of emotional labor without emotional security. 8 years of giving unconditional love while constantly being reminded I was temporary. I explained that calmly. Rachel accused me of being dramatic, sensitive, immature. Funny how quickly people weaponize your emotions once your pain becomes inconvenient. Then she said something I'll never forget. "She's my daughter, Dan. What do you expect me to do?" I looked at her for a long moment and quietly answered, "Protect your marriage too." Ava appeared halfway down the stairs, still sleepy, still annoyed. She looked at the packed car, then at me. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I said softly, "You don't have to worry anymore. I heard you." I left, no screaming, no slammed doors, no dramatic speeches, just silence. The kind of silence that echoes long after someone is gone. I stayed with my older brother for 2 weeks. He didn't pressure me for explanations. He just handed me a beer the first night and said, "You can stay as long as you need." That simple kindness nearly broke me. Because when you spend years feeling emotionally invisible, basic compassion feels overwhelming. Rachel called constantly. At first angry, then pleading, then confused. She said I was abandoning the family. The irony of that statement almost made me laugh. You can't abandon a place you were never fully allowed to belong. A week later, Rachel came to my brother's house. She looked exhausted. Mascara smeared, hands shaking. We sat outside on the back porch. She apologized for Ava's words. But even then, there was distance in the apology, qualification, excuses. She's hurting. She's confused. She's just a kid. I asked one simple question. Did she apologize? Rachel hesitated. That hesitation answered everything. Apparently, Ava felt bad I'd left, but not bad enough to admit she was wrong. Rachel asked me to come home. She promised things would improve. Family therapy. More communication. Better boundaries. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But deep down, I already knew something had shattered beyond repair. Because trust doesn't die in one dramatic moment. It dies slowly, quietly, through repeated reminders that your feelings matter less. I moved into a small apartment downtown. At first, it felt empty, painfully empty. No footsteps upstairs. No dishes clattering in the kitchen. No television noise drifting through the hallway, just silence. But eventually, the silence became peaceful. I started sleeping better, eating better, thinking clearly again. And slowly, I realized how emotionally exhausted I'd been for years. When you spend all your time trying to hold a family together, you stop noticing how much of yourself disappears in the process. Rachel continued reaching out. She sent photos, memories, long emotional texts. She said the house felt different without me. Of course it did. I'd been carrying half the emotional and practical weight alone. But being needed isn't the same as being loved properly. That distinction changed my life. 2 months later, I filed for divorce. Rachel was devastated. She called crying. Asked how I could throw away 8 years. I almost told her the truth, that I wasn't throwing them away. I was finally accepting what they really were, but I stayed quiet. Sometimes explanations only create more opportunities for people to avoid accountability. The divorce itself was simple. No children together, separate assets mostly, minimal legal conflict. Emotionally, though, it felt like attending the funeral of a life I once believed in completely. The hardest part wasn't losing Rachel. It was grieving the version of family I thought we had. That illusion took years to disappear. After the divorce, mutual friends slowly revealed things. Apparently, Ava struggled after I left. Her grades dropped. She became withdrawn. Rachel was overwhelmed handling everything alone. The grocery shopping, repairs, bills, scheduling, daily stress. All the invisible work I'd quietly managed for years suddenly became visible through my absence. Funny how people rarely notice what you do until you stop doing it. About 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Ava unexpectedly. Not Rachel. Ava. I was at a bookstore downtown when I heard someone softly say my name. I turned around. She looked older. Not physically, emotionally, like life had humbled her. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she walked toward me slowly. I didn't think I'd actually see you, she said. I nodded politely. How have you been? She shrugged. Okay, I guess. Awkward silence followed. Then she looked down at the floor and whispered, I'm sorry. The words were quiet, fragile, real. And somehow, they hurt more than the original insult. Because this was the apology I needed back when there was still something left to save. I asked if she meant it. She nodded immediately. Tears filled her eyes. She admitted she'd been angry at her biological father for years and had taken it out on me because I was the safe target. You stayed, she said. So I figured you'd keep staying no matter what. That sentence shattered my heart, because she was right. For years, I accepted treatment I didn't deserve because I believed loyalty meant endurance. But loyalty without respect becomes self-destruction. Ava cried openly in the middle of the bookstore. She said the house felt empty after I left, that Rachel was stressed all the time, that she finally realized how much I had done. Then she asked the question I think she already knew the answer to. Do you think you'd ever come back? I looked at her for a very long moment. And for the first time in years, I answered honestly without guilt. No, she cried harder, but I stayed calm, not cold, just certain, because forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. I forgave her long before that moment. She was young, wounded, confused, but forgiveness doesn't magically rebuild trust. Some damage changes relationships permanently. Ava asked if we could stay in contact. I told her maybe someday, but not yet. Then I wished her well and left the bookstore. I sat in my car afterward for nearly 20 minutes staring through the windshield. Not because I regretted leaving, because I finally understood something important. Love alone cannot sustain a relationship where respect is conditional. You can sacrifice endlessly for people. You can give them patience, support, stability, consistency. But if they fundamentally see you as temporary, eventually your soul notices. And once it does, you can never unknow it. A year later, my life looks completely different. I bought a small condo. Started exercising regularly. Took weekend road trips. Reconnected with hobbies I abandoned years ago. Photography, fishing, reading. I even started dating again. Her name is Claire. She's thoughtful, emotionally mature, and incredibly direct. One night over dinner, she asked me something no one had ever asked before. What do you need from a relationship to feel safe? I nearly laughed, not because it was funny. Because I realized I'd spent nearly a decade focused entirely on everyone else's emotional needs while ignoring my own. Claire listens, not just politely, actually listens. When something hurts me, she doesn't minimize it. She doesn't tell me I'm overreacting. She doesn't ask me to tolerate disrespect for the sake of peace. And honestly, that still feels unfamiliar sometimes. Healing is strange like that. You become so accustomed to emotional neglect that healthy treatment feels suspicious at first. Rachel contacted me once more last winter, a long email. She admitted she failed me, not intentionally, but consistently. She said she got so used to me being dependable that she stopped noticing how much I carried. She admitted she often prioritized avoiding conflict with Ava over protecting our marriage. Then came the sentence that stayed with me longest. I think I assumed you'd never leave. There it was, the truth, not cruelty, not evil, just complacency. People often take the most loyal person for granted because they mistake loyalty for permanence. They think love guarantees endurance. But eventually, even the most patient heart reaches a limit. I never replied to Rachel's email, not because I hated her. I don't. I actually hope she finds happiness, but some conversations belong in the past. Reopening them only creates emotional confusion where clarity already exists. These days, my apartment is quiet, but it's a peaceful quiet, not lonely, not heavy, just calm. Sometimes I cook dinner and realize there's nobody criticizing the seasoning. Nobody stomping upstairs angry. Nobody expecting me to absorb emotional tension without reacting. And in those tiny moments, I feel grateful. Not bitter, grateful, because leaving taught me something I wish more people understood. You are not required to remain where you are only valued for what you provide. Being useful is not the same as being loved. Being needed is not the same as being respected. And sacrificing yourself endlessly will never force people to appreciate you. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away quietly. No revenge, no screaming, no destruction, just absence. Because absence has a way of revealing everything your presence protected people from noticing. The empty sink, the unpaid bill, the emotional labor, the steady support, the calm voice. The reliable person, the one who stayed, until he finally didn't. A few weeks ago, I drove past the old neighborhood by accident. The house looked smaller somehow, different. The front porch light was broken. The lawn needed trimming, little signs of neglect. I parked across the street for a moment, not out of longing, just reflection. I remembered arriving there years earlier full of hope, believing effort and love could build permanence. Part of me felt sad for that version of myself. Another part felt proud, because he tried. He gave everything honestly. There's dignity in that even if the ending hurts. As I drove away, I realized something unexpected. I no longer felt rejected. For years, I viewed leaving as proof that I failed. Now I understand it differently. Leaving was the first time I fully chose myself. And maybe that's the real ending to this story. Not abandonment. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Just a man finally understanding that love should never require you to disappear in order to keep everyone else comfortable. If someone truly wants you in their life, they protect your place in it. They don't merely enjoy the benefits of your presence. They value the person providing them. I learned that late. But not too late. And honestly, that lesson probably saved the rest of my life. Update, 2 years later, I didn't think I'd ever revisit this story again. Life moved forward, quietly, steadily. The pain eventually stopped feeling sharp and became something softer. Like an old scar you notice only when rain is coming. Claire and I are engaged now. I never expected to get married again. For a long time, the idea terrified me. Not because I stopped believing in love, because I stopped trusting my own judgment. When you spend years convincing yourself to tolerate emotional neglect, you start wondering whether you even know what healthy love looks like anymore. Claire changed that slowly. Not through grand gestures, through consistency. She notices things when I'm tired, when I'm overwhelmed, when I retreat emotionally. Instead of punishing me for it, she asks questions. Gentle questions, safe questions. I didn't realize how healing that could be. Last month, something happened I never expected. I received a handwritten letter in my mailbox. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting immediately. Ava. I stared at the envelope for nearly 10 minutes before opening it. Inside was a 3-page letter. No excuses, no manipulation, just honesty. She wrote that therapy forced her to confront painful truths about herself, that she spent years blaming abandonment by her father on everyone around her, that she weaponized rejection before anyone else could reject her first. She admitted she treated me horribly because deep down, she believed every father figure eventually leaves anyway. Then came the line that hit me hardest. You were the only dad who actually stayed, and I punished you for it. I had to put the letter down after reading that, not because I was angry. Because grief returned unexpectedly. Not grief over losing Rachel. Not even grief over losing the family. Grief over what could have been if everyone had faced the truth sooner. Ava ended the letter by thanking me for every ride to school, every soccer game, every late-night conversation, every meal, every moment I showed up. She said she finally understood that fatherhood is not biology. It's consistency, sacrifice, presence, love. Then she apologized one final time, a real apology, the kind without excuses attached. Claire asked if I planned to respond. I told her I didn't know, and honestly, I still don't. Not because I'm cruel, not because I want revenge, but because healing doesn't always mean reopening closed doors. Sometimes healing simply means understanding the past clearly enough that it no longer controls you. For the first time in years, I think all three of us finally understand what really happened. Ava wasn't evil, Rachel wasn't heartless, and I wasn't weak. We were just 3 damaged people trying to build a family without fully understanding our own wounds. Unfortunately, love without emotional accountability eventually collapses under the weight of unspoken pain. That's the truth nobody tells you about blended families. Good intentions are not enough. Love is not enough. You need communication, boundaries, respect, protection, and the courage to confront hard truths before resentment grows roots. I spent years believing endurance was the same thing as strength. Now I know better. Real strength is recognizing when your presence is being taken for granted and having the courage to walk away before resentment destroys whatever kindness remains inside you. Some nights I still think about that Tuesday evening. The rain, the kitchen light, the dish towel in my hands, the sentence that changed everything. But memory feels different now, less painful. More distant, like watching an old movie about someone I used to know. And maybe that's growth, not forgetting, not erasing. just finally making peace with the fact that some chapters end painfully, even when everyone involved once loved each other. I used to think silence meant emptiness. Now I understand silence can also mean freedom, peace, clarity, a chance to hear your own worth again after years of drowning beneath everyone else's expectations. The silence in that house after I left probably was deafening, but the silence inside me afterward, that eventually became healing, and that made all the difference. Final update, 5 years later, I'm 49 now. Sometimes that still surprises me, not because aging bothers me, because 5 years ago, I genuinely believed my life was over. Funny how pain tricks you into thinking endings are permanent. In reality, some endings are simply painful beginnings wearing different clothes. Claire and I got married in a small ceremony by a lake outside the city. Nothing extravagant. Just close friends, soft music, good food, and peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't require anyone walking on eggshells. The kind that doesn't disappear the second conflict enters the room. When I saw Claire walking toward me that afternoon, smiling with tears in her eyes, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Chosen, not tolerated, not useful, not convenient. Chosen. That difference changes a person. We bought a house together last year. Not huge, but warm, comfortable. There's a small office where I keep my photography equipment. A backyard Claire turned into a garden, and a kitchen where nobody argues anymore. Sometimes I stand there making coffee early in the morning, while sunlight comes through the windows, and I realize how calm my life has become. For years, I confused emotional exhaustion with responsibility. Now I understand healthy love is supposed to feel safe, not draining. A few months ago, something unexpected happened again. I received another letter from Ava. This time, the envelope included a wedding invitation. She was getting married. I stared at the invitation for a very long time. Then I noticed a handwritten note folded inside. It simply said, "You taught me what showing up for people looks like." I failed to appreciate it when I was younger, but I carry those lessons with me now. If you're willing, it would mean a lot to see you there. Claire asked what I planned to do, honestly. I didn't know. Part of me felt protective of the peace I'd built. Another part remembered the little girl who once sat in my car eating ice cream after a bad day at school. People change. Sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, but they do change. After thinking about it for several days, I decided to attend, not because the past disappeared, not because everything was magically repaired, but because carrying bitterness forever felt heavier than letting some of it go. The wedding was held at a vineyard outside town. Beautiful weather. String lights, soft music drifting through the evening air. When Ava saw me arrive, she froze. For a second, she looked 16 again, nervous, emotional, unsure. Then she walked quickly toward me and hugged me so tightly I almost lost my balance. She cried immediately. "I didn't think you'd come," she whispered. I told her quietly, "You mattered to me once." That doesn't disappear completely. She cried harder after that. Rachel was there too, older now, calmer. Life had softened her in some ways, humbled her in others. When our eyes met across the reception hall, there was no anger left between us, just history. She walked over later during dinner and thanked me for coming. Then she said something I never expected. "You were the best partner I ever had. I just realized it too late." Years ago, hearing that would have destroyed me. Now, it simply made me sad, because timing matters. Love can be real and still fail. People can care about each other deeply and still damage one another beyond repair. That's adulthood. Messy, complicated, human. Near the end of the night, Ava asked if we could dance. At first, I almost refused. Then I remembered something. The very first school dance she attended when she was 13. She'd been terrified nobody would ask her to dance, so I danced with her in the kitchen beforehand to make her laugh. Back then, she stood on my shoes while we moved around the room. Now she was a grown woman in a white dress asking me for another dance years later. Life is strange like that. We danced slowly while the band played an old love song. Halfway through, Ava started crying again. She apologized one more time, not dramatically, not for forgiveness, just honestly. And this time, something inside me finally settled completely. I realized I no longer carried anger, only acceptance. After the wedding, we didn't suddenly become a family again. That chapter remained closed, but occasionally Ava sends updates now. Photos. Holiday messages, small check-ins, healthy distance, healthy honesty, and strangely enough, that's enough. Because not every broken relationship needs full restoration to find peace. Sometimes closure looks like two people finally understanding each other years after the damage was done. Last week, Claire asked me whether I regretted leaving all those years ago. I thought carefully before answering. Then I said no. Leaving saved me. If I had stayed, resentment would have turned me into someone bitter, someone angry, someone hollow. Walking away forced everyone involved to confront truths they had ignored for years, including me, especially me. I learned that self-respect matters, that boundaries matter. That love without mutual protection, eventually, becomes emotional starvation. And most importantly, I learned that being alone temporarily is far less painful than staying somewhere you constantly feel unwanted. Sometimes people ask whether I consider Ava my daughter. The honest answer is complicated. Biologically, no. Emotionally, partly. Some relationships leave fingerprints on your soul even after they end. You can move forward, heal, build a new life. But certain people remain part of your emotional history forever. Not as open wounds, just permanent chapters. Tonight, as I'm writing this final update, Claire is asleep upstairs. Rain is tapping softly against the windows, and strangely enough, it reminds me of that Tuesday night years ago. Only now, the memory doesn't hurt. Because I finally understand something I didn't understand back then. Losing a place where you were never fully valued is not failure. It's freedom disguised as heartbreak. And sometimes the most important family you ever build is the one that finally teaches you your own worth. That's where my story truly ends. Not with anger, not revenge, not regret, just peace. The kind of peace that only arrives after you stop begging people to appreciate your presence and start appreciating yourself instead.